Dr. Robert Price, New Testament authority and scholar, Bo Bennett of debategod.org, and myself recently had a discussion on the reliability of the Bible and to some extent on the New Testament more particularly. We covered several areas, but one of the first topics related to the reliability and veracity or lack thereof of the Bible was the telephone game. And in this respect, we were talking about how the four Gospels came to be orally transmitted and formulated in their, more or less in their present form, pre-translated form, so that we would now have what we know as the four canonical Gospels in the New Testament. Dr. Price compared the oral transmission of the Gospel stories and sayings of Jesus to the telephone game. In the telephone game, several people are assembled. One person whispers into another's ear a particular phrase or sentence, and that person then proceeds to pass on that message as nearly correctly as they can recall. And what is illustrated through the game is that by the time the last person or the last link in the chain is reached, we sometimes have a radically different phrase than what we started with. Now, is the transmission, the oral transmission of the four New Testament Gospels related to this process? Would the reliability of the New Testament manuscripts and the Gospel manuscripts be thrown into question through the telephone game? J.P. Holding, in his book Trusting the New Testament, refers to anachronism, and he proposes that there are some limitations to the analogy of the telephone game that really do not apply, or very disanalogous with the situation in the early church and around the time of Jesus. Their memories were more acute because they were less accustomed to relying on the written word. In short, Holding's major finding is that unless there is a specific charge or a specific defect that is brought on the table by an issue with the telephone game, where the unreliability of a report would result from bad memories, unless that's the case and there is evidence brought forth, that's really an empty assertion that we can't trust the reliability of the four canonical Gospels due to the telephone game. Our memories today may be quite fuzzy. However, there do seem to be some cultural and historical differences in our times. Today we can consult our textbook, our Bible, if we forget a memory verse, but back then they were memory dependent. Today we are text dependent. So there may be some interesting differences suggested by their reliance on their memory as a chief means of communicating stories and truths, and our dependence on the written word in order to communicate effectively. An illustration from today. I share the family story, an heirloom, if you will, with my children. A story about my grandfather, who was the first to develop a household detergent that was later put into more widespread use by a larger corporation. Now, in expressing or sharing this tale with my children, I have some basic details which will certainly be recalled by them and also passed down to their children. There need not be any essential distortion of the facts of the case. My grandfather, Paul Zenz, invented a household detergent, the first of its kind. The product was called Spawn, and his idea was copied by a major corporation and turned into a much bigger, more household name. So in recalling these and sharing these and orally transmitting this story, I need not fuss too much over how much would be lost in translation. The basic message will be passed down from generation to generation. So just as myself and my children can be fairly certain that my grandfather Paulsens was not the first to invent a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, due to the oral transmission of our family story, so the Bible reader and believer can be fairly certain that Jesus was not a space alien who landed on the earth 2,000 years ago. And I think that conveys the essential point of J.P. Holding's message. So the four gospel writers, as we have their testimony about the life, the work, the power, the death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, as we have these testimonies today, we need not doubt them. The telephone game, while it is relevant and it is amusing in some contexts, really doesn't apply in this case. The four Gospels agree that this was a man sent from God, a man God and human at the same time. And we can be sure about this.